Welcome to Animind, an anime podcast where we nerd out about all things anime and dive deeply into the storytelling art form while dissecting the psychological aspects that it speaks to. I'm your co-host, Matthew Basil.
I'm your co-host, Danny Ari.
And I am your co-host, Graham Pugh.
So on this episode, we will be discussing Spirited Away. It was a landmark in the anime industry, really, because it won an Oscar for Best Animated Film in 2003. First, and I think still the only one to have done that. Also held the record for the highest grossing film in Japanese history for 19 years. It was just recently unseated, I think, in 2020. So this is a huge film, not only anime, but in cinema in general. Since it is an older film and it has a lot of symbolism that ties into itself, we are going to be doing spoilers here in this episode. If you don't want anything spoiled about this film, stop this podcast right now. Go watch it because it is an amazing film, and then come back and listen to this podcast. You know, I knew about it through the Oscars. I used to follow the Oscars back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I did know about this film from its Oscar win, but knew nothing pretty much else about it aside from the basic concept of this young girl has her parents turn to pigs and is trapped in a spirit world and tries to rescue her parents. That was pretty much it that I knew. So I went in pretty fresh as most of the stuff that we've done this season. And I must say, I really, really enjoyed the film. I knew I was watching a beautiful piece of art, but I did not understand a lot of the symbolism, I felt like. And maybe that's because I'm not used to anime. I'm not used to the culture. So I'm going to be leaning on you two here to kind of help dissect kind of exactly what the messages were, because I think I broadly got them, but not fully picked up on all the nuance and everything that was going on. So I know this film was written and directed by, I'm going to butcher his name, Hayao Miyazaki?
Miyazaki?
There you go.
I love him.
Yeah, he's a prolific anime filmmaker and screenwriter and a manga artist. I know he just recently, like, we're talking like at the recording of this, I think it was in the last couple weeks, announced that he was coming out of retirement to do another film. So I will definitely be looking out for that one now.
This is like the second time he's done this, though.
No, this is like the fourth time, I think.
Wow.
He's done that like 4 or 5 times. Like,
but thank goodness that he always comes out of retirement. If
Encore. Literally, that's what everybody does. And we're like, okay, maybe he'll stay out of retirement this time because he just ends up coming out either way. Again.
I think it's him being such a like perfectionist, like so much about hard work that he makes himself come out of retirement because he can't sit around.
That's like asking like Bach or Beethoven, like, yeah, just stop composing masterpieces. Yeah, that just shows you how much I really love Miyazaki films. No, he's an artist, honestly. I personally was heartbroken when he was like announcing his retirement. So this news is super exciting.
I'm now excited too after watching Spirited Away.
Yes, now you gotta watch all the others.
I know. I plan to. We're gonna cover them on the series.
We can make that a whole season, honestly.
After seeing Spirited Away, I would definitely be game for that because, like I said, I was just it's Spirited Away was very different than I think any of the things that we've covered so far in this season. In just that it's very quiet. It's not, people punching each other or, superpowers or action. It's just it's the opposite of that. It was just this real quiet, meditative. It's still, I guess, in the sci-fi fantasy genre because obviously there's a lot of magic and folklore and mythology. So I definitely would, I guess, still put it in the sci-fi fantasy umbrella. But it's definitely not, action, superpowers, villains. There's really, I don't know. Maybe you guys can educate me. Is there villains even in this movie?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would argue that there's still a lot of action. I mean, there's still a sense of urgency. There's still, especially with the music. The music like complements throughout. Okay, that's another thing about his movie is that it's known for its not only its beautiful artwork, surreal kind of ethereal type of world building, but also the fact that the music compositions are just, they go so complementary to everything else. It's a masterpiece.
I think at the song that plays in the end credits, and when it's like when I watched it a couple of years ago, I think I actually teared up.
Honestly, if you were just to listen to the soundtrack, you could tell where the action is, and it's not the type of action where people are punching each other and there's blood and crazy guns and this and that, but it's action in the sense the main character Chihiro is really, she's panicked. She's in this strange world without her family, and there's these creatures and magic when none of that exists, and she gets put into danger, and the people she ends up caring about get put into danger, and that also brings me to, yes, there's definitely a villain, because I feel like every piece of media we consume, there's gonna be a hero. There's also anti-heroes, but the hero of this story, it's definitely Chihiro. The villain is Yubaba, because she is the quote-unquote evil sister. She's the witch, you know, she's actively against the hero, and if that's not a villain, I don't know what is. But the fact that she doesn't break her word, and I guess I admire that about her character. Like, even though she loses something, she's not going to cheat. So she's not the worst villain. At least she keeps her word. Whereas another villain would be like, oh, well, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to do what I want. So I can admire that about her. So I wouldn't say she's technically the evilest villain ever, but definitely a villain.
Yeah, she's a businesswoman. So she at least sticks to her own rules.
You know how they have like toxic masculinity and toxic femininity, toxic capitalism? When you put money above people, it becomes toxic.
And Yubaba definitely demonstrates that very explicitly.
Absolutely.
I mean, I did pick up that enough in the movie that she is constantly putting not just Chihiro, who's the main character, at risk over money, but she's putting all her workers, because basically, for those of you who are not familiar with this movie, Yubaba is a witch basically who operates, I guess, like a resort and bathhouse for spirits.
Yeah.
And has a bunch of other spirits working for her, and just basically is like, oh, this guy has money, or this spirit has money, well, get her to a bath. I don't care that you're going to drown in the tub. I don't care that you're overworked. I don't care you're going to pass out, because so she almost becomes like a slave driver.
If you think about Kamaji, he was like, I am the slave to the bathhouse. I run the water. And he straight up says he's like, in his words, he calls himself a slave to Yubaba. And like, I would have loved to know more about his character. Like, honestly.
Yeah. I really love his character too. Like,
he's creepy as hell in the beginning though.
He is. Again, for those of you not familiar with this movie, he's like a spider guy, right? Or something?
Yeah,
like a spider god?
6 arms and 2 legs and a big old like mustache.
And the big glasses.
And his big old glasses.
Like,
But
you never see his eyes.
He saves Chihiro's ass, though. Like, right in the beginning, he's like, oh, yeah, she's my granddaughter. Like, she's some strange girl that's just really persistent. And you're like, yep, nope, yeah, give her a job. Go get her a job. Yeah, totally. And he also, like, shows his empathetic side. Like, even though he seems really, like, standoffish and bitter and kind of cold, later on, he cares for Haku, and he sleeps by his side at that point, and it's, yeah. I think that's really powerful to like demonstrate the kind of character he is. He might come off as cold, but deep down, he's a good dude.
Yeah, he's just a prickly old man. Like in the scene where Chihiro first meets him, he tries shooing her away and just stonewalling her, and then someone else comes in. There's no like transition where he's like, oh, well, you're a good kid. But he's like, oh, yeah, that's my granddaughter. And it was like 2 seconds ago, prickly. And it's like, I know you're a good guy.
And another thing I noticed about this film with the characters is that looks are super deceiving. I think that the whole idea of don't judge a book by its cover is like really important throughout this film, because you see this really scary old man. He ends up being super sweet and caring, and like literally one of the characters like, old man stuck his neck out for you. Not just that, but Chihiro's parents, they look like, oh, they're just a cute little family, but they're super selfish. They're totally cool leaving their like 10-year-old kid at the car in some forest and going and exploring some like creepy dark tunnel by themselves. They're like, and like, she's like, don't cling to me, you're gonna trip me. And she's just like really cold.
The parents were absolutely horrible.
No, they were awful. The only one with common sense in that family is the little girl.
Yes. She's
and
more
then they were going to leave the movers to wait for them for a few extra hours so they could explore.
They got a key. They can start moving. And I mean, it's their job and they do that. But that's not what bothered me. The fact that they were like, they were like, oh, it's fine, but they don't care. They don't care if she stays behind or if she follows them. She's like, well, I guess I'll go with you because I don't want to be by myself. And she's like telling them throughout the beginning of the film, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't just help ourselves to this stuff. Like, it's not ours.
And he's just taking the food that's just sitting out. Like, he's not even suspicious. He's like, sure, whatever.
I don't see any people, but I'm going to devour this food.
And they're literally turned into pigs.
They literally get turned into pigs.
I think Hayao Miyazaki's favorite animal, I think he's gone on record to say his favorite animal is pigs. But
there you go.
But there's another movie of his called Porco Rosso, where the main character is like a man turned into a pig, and they also use, at least in the English dub, they use the whole pig thing as like very derogatory.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure in the original translation how much that is, but in that movie they definitely use the same type of imagery of a pig and negativity and greed and poor character.
Yeah, and the fact that the food that turns them into pigs, well, I'm sure it's the magic, but they're eating meat. They're eating so much meat. They get turned into pigs. Later on, you see pig pens, and you see like it looks very, very reminiscent of a butcher, like a people who sell meat. And I'm like, oh no. And Yubaba's like, I'm going to turn you into a pig. I'm going to turn you into this or that. What animal should I turn you into? And I'm like, oh my God, are they eating people?
I could turn you into a lump of coal.
Yeah. And that makes me wonder about the suit sprites.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. She's just burning. She could just be burning like people's souls alive just to fuel her bathhouse.
Yeah, turn you into a piece of coal. Yes, that's dark. Oh, that's dark.
Oh, and that ties in even more into like the capitalist stuff, just using people to keep the business machine going. Oh man,
God,
I've seen this so many times and I never thought about that.
Yes, and like greed, all that corporate greed and stuff. You see No Face later on, and that's how he traps so many of like the people. You know, his character. We'll go into his character, but he, you know, to trap people, he's trying to give them gold, and they're all falling for. They're like, you can create gold. So they're all falling over themselves to like impress him, making literal fools of themselves.
They're like tripping over each other and knocking each other around, and they are like going bananas for just a handful of change.
And again, we'll go into more of this when we talk about that character more, but he eats 3 of them too, right?
Yeah, yes. And I mean, he eats them, and I'm wondering if that's how he was able, like the first frog, he eats him and then he can speak because he can't talk. So he like absorbs the power to talk to them, you know, and communicate. I feel like originally that's kind of where it started. He wanted to be able to communicate. And then he was like, oh, I could keep getting more powerful and bigger if I keep doing this. And even, you know, it kind of highlights back to the capitalism is that even Chihiro is like, I think this place is bad for him. He's not like this. He's not this guy. He's helping me. He's helped me before. So I guess we might as well start talking about No Face because we're already here. He's that character you see all over classic anime like pages where you like see different characters. Like, oh, you see Naruto and you see, you know, No Face is one of those like classic characters, and it's because he's a complex character.
But he's super relatable.
Right, he's super relatable. He reaches out to Chihiro because I think he realizes that she's also an outcast. He realizes that you're not supposed to be here, and he's not really supposed to be there either. He gets corrupted by the darkness that's inside the bathhouse. That's why Chihiro's like, we need to get him out of there. He's not this way, because he's helped her. He's helped her multiple times. She's like, I know him. He's not like this. And when he finally has the ability to speak, he goes, I'm so lonely. I'm just so lonely. He's literally absorbing people, like, with this toxicity. It's really powerful because, like, what drives him to do all this is loneliness.
I think the part of the movie where he eats the frog character is after he mistakens something Chihiro says as some sort of rejection. I could be wrong.
Oh, yeah, when she rejects the ticket from him, or like the little plaque.
Yeah, and he gets very visibly upset. Like, he looks so sad, and I think that
he's like, take it, you know?
Like, his hands are trembling. He's like, take it.
It's heartbreaking, and for a character that has almost no lines. He's such a powerful character, just in
And
the way his movements are, the way he reacts.
His face is just a mask, and it looks almost like those, like the opera mask or whatever. Like there's the smiling one and the frowning one.
It's a no mask.
Yes,
Yeah.
no face.
Right. But I mean, it's a no mask is used in Japanese theater.
Oh yeah, NOH, yeah.
NOH, yeah.
Yeah, NOH. I mean, that's what his face is. It's the NOH no mask.
Right, and I
But
thought it was funny that they call him a no face, but it's spelled NO face.
Mhm.
But even though it's a no mask, yeah.
Japanese culture, from my experience, very much likes wordplay.
Oh yeah. So I really appreciated No Face character because Chihiro's such a strong character. She doesn't give in to the greed. She doesn't give in to scare tactics. Like, she's terrified throughout the story, but she's so resilient. And No Face, he seems scary, but he's so malleable. The way that he is easily provoked and he gets upset, and he's like the other end of where Chihiro's like super strong all the time. He gives in to these temptations, these things that happen. You see him become dark, and she even tries to help him, even though he's eating people, and because she sees the good in him. She sees the good in everybody. I think it's great at the end because he's so lonely that he ends up having a place to go. It was sweet because she goes, I think you're gonna do nicely here, you know? And he's not lonely anymore.
And then I think like the last thing you see of him, apart from him waving goodbye, is he's just sitting and like knitting.
So happy, big old smiles. I'm just like, oh, I feel good.
One thing about him that is going back a little bit to just how malleable he is, really tries to win people over because, like he says later, I'm so lonely. And at first, like when we first see him, he's just outside the bathhouse and no one's paying any attention to him. And then Chihiro notices him, and later she's like, hey, you want to come in? And then like she lets him into the bathhouse, and that's how he starts getting involved with everyone. But when he sees how nice she is to him, that's when he starts like giving her the bath tokens that she needs, just because she showed that initial step of kindness. And then like the toxic work environment really influences him.
He's trying to buy her affection. He's so lonely, and he sees that this is how the world works because he's here in this world, in this bathhouse where everybody's greedy and everybody wants something, but she doesn't. And it's very confusing to him. That's what he finds so interesting about her, I think, is the fact that he's trying to buy her affection and it's not working. She goes, oh, I don't need this. I don't want this. Even gold, you know, when most people are killing each other over it, basically, she's just like, thank you, but no thanks. And that's what provokes him.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned that. It's like it's like he has all this gold and like everyone's tripping over themselves just to get it, but he doesn't care when they give him attention as much as when Chihiro gives him attention.
I want to give Matt like a chance to talk really quick because we are both so passionate about this film.
I was very drawn to the No Face character. Again, I would say I wasn't quite sure what the symbolism was there. Danny, you said the loneliness, that really rings true and makes sense. I don't know if this is what was intended. Sometimes when you wear a mask throughout life, it can make you very, very lonely because nobody knows who you really are. No one acknowledges who you really are. No one appreciates it. And you have to pretend to be something you're not, and you have to buy your way or give tokens. So that rings very true to me. I actively worked over the last few years to avoid that, where I felt like I had to earn other people's love or friendship by giving them stuff, or I had to wear a mask to hide who I truly was in order to be accepted by them. So that's, I think, a very interesting way to look at the No Face character, and who, as I think, to me, was besides Chihiro, was probably the other character that really pulled me in and pulled in my heartstrings as I was watching this film. So I'm just enjoying the dissection and the insights into that character. And I think it also speaks to, Graham, you mentioned that he got very mad because that's when he started eating people. Because I think he ate the frog guy, demon, whatever, to gain the abilities to speak properly. But then he started giving gold to Chihiro, And Chihiro like refused it and said, no, I don't want this. And then I think that's when he got through him and he got mad. He started eating other people. Yeah, and that's when he goes like full rampage. And they got to get him out of that greedy or very kind of superficial bathhouse, which, it's a very superficial, nobody actually cares about anybody there, it seemed like. So he had to get out of that kind of superficial structure and get more out into a truer world, so to speak.
Less tainted.
Less tainted, yeah, exactly, before No Face could find kind of their home.
Like, as soon as he gets out of the bathhouse, he throws up everyone he ate, and then he's just hanging out with Chihiro again, and, like, there's just another quiet moment. They're just sitting by each other on a train, and
yes.
So cool.
Okay, so talking about that for just a second, the fact that evilness or darkness is manifested literally as a darkness, like a slug or a sludge or some sort of physical thing that mucks up their insides, that messes them up. And it's shown with Haku because the slug is Yubaba's her control over him. The fact that Chihiro's able to just stomp it, like, she straight up just stomps it, and Zeniba, Yubaba's sister, is just like, that's hilarious. Like, you just stomped her control over him. You don't even realize what you've done. It's so great. And she, like, respects her because of it. And then No Face, after, because of all this darkness, this greed, he's just throwing up this sludge type of just ichor, and until he's himself again. And it's all darkness that's just filling him up, making him big and laggy.
And this kind of goes back a little bit to what Matthew was saying earlier. Putting on the mask, it like when he like eats the frog, he he literally changes his appearance. Like, he gets a little weird tuft of hair on his head, and like
frog
his
feet,
elongated. Yeah, and then he starts talking. It's like he's literally like changing.
About the sludge can also be looked towards the river deity that came through.
Yeah.
And was the stink monster, sludge monster.
And again, back to the whole don't judge something by its appearance, because everyone's like, oh, we can't accept him. Well, he's already here. I guess we will. And of course, the only one she's scared of him. Chihiro's scared at first, but she's trying to be respectful. And she does her best. She goes, I think he needs help. And she's trying her best. She's going through this sludge, and it's gross. She's getting through this physically with all of her might. She does her best to help.
Yeah, and then like you were saying, like, she's the only one who initially cares, like actually cares. And this goes back to some of the superficiality that Matt was talking about earlier. Like, when he first comes in, like, they're like, oh, get him out of here. And then they're like, oh, wait, well, he's a paying customer. And then, like, they're, like, holding their breath, and Yubaba's like, oh, welcome, come in. And
she's like, trying not to throw up.
She's, like, clearly disgusted, but, like, putting on that fake air of politeness. And then, like, I think one of the other, like, frog guys, like, the one with the little red mustache and the hat, he's like, right this way. But they only care about him because of his money, and he's a customer, and that means we're gonna gain something from it. But then Chihiro's like, oh no, I think he actually needs help. And then that's when everyone
works
goes
together.
To pitch in.
That's the only time you see them care about anything else, and only because they are told to do it. And I think that's super powerful, because the only one who originally wanted to help was Chihiro. And then, of course, because Yubaba knows, oh, he's rich. I know what he is. And then she's like forcing everybody to help. And they're like, yeah, let's work together. It's not genuine.
And she's just like waving a flag off to the side while everyone else is like pulling with all their might on this rope to get this bicycle that's stuck in him out.
Well, yeah, that's your classical. I mean, I can't think of another example offhand right now. I'm blanking, but I mean, that's your classical. The person that comes in looking like the dirty beggar, and is really a king, in real life. I'm sorry?
Beauty and the Beast, like that in the prologue.
That idea too.
Oh, you disgusting old woman, get out of here. And he's like, and then the old lady's like, tricked you.
Right? I'm actually a goddess, by the way.
And by the way, now you're ugly and you're a beast, and have fun in this castle.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now, and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
We have talked about Chihiro and how she has this other name, Sen. So when she has to work for Yubaba, she actually signs a contract with her name that Yubaba actually sucks the power from. She physically, magically takes the name off the paper into her hand, and she goes, "Now it's mine. That's not your name anymore." She goes, "You're Sen now. That's your name. That's your work name." Something that I found interesting about this film was the power of a name. I've seen it in a lot of other media, and what is the power of a name? What happens when you lose your name? But in this world, if you lose your name, you can't go home, and she even, there's a point where she's like, "Oh, that's right. That's my name. Chihiro's my name, not Sen." And Haku can't go home because he doesn't know his name, And it's so sad because he's like, "I would love to go home." That's probably why he helps her, because I can still help you even though I can't go home.
It's kind of funny because he reminds her of what her real name is, and then at the end of the movie, she's the one to remind him of what his real name is. Yeah. And the whole time they've been helping each other out throughout the whole movie. Haku's initially the one who helps her get into the bathhouse to get a job, to help her parents, and then there's a lot of back and forth.
And then also the fact that we're gonna go back to capitalism again, because I'm pretty sure that's what this movie's about. You can't get away. Haku gets his name back, but she goes, "They filled in that river." Because he's the river deity. He's the river god. And she goes, "Oh, they filled it in and put up a strip mall." It's literally capitalism, destroying nature to, the song, pave paradise, put up a parking lot. Literally, that's what happened. And he goes, "I can't go home, but I'm free now." And that broke my heart.
Miyazaki loves environmentalism. If we ever do get around to doing the other movies, Matt, that will probably be the biggest theme of his, apart from strong female characters, because almost all the main characters in his movie are female. And if the main character's not female, the secondary lead is. Even
though he got his name back, which he does appreciate and he's so happy about, he can't go home. It's so, I can't handle how sad that is. God. But yeah, the whole name thing is brought throughout the whole movie, from the beginning where she signs off her name to it's kind of the idea of No Face too, is that he's lonely, he doesn't have a name, he has no place that he belongs. And
no identity.
Yeah, no identity. And
so he just latches on to whatever he needs to in order to make bonds with people, whether he's trying to fit in with the bathhouse people by literally taking a part of them to become them so that he's one of the crowd.
Yeah.
But like No Face isn't even like his real name. That's just what people call him. You never find out his real name. So it's like he didn't really have any power because he doesn't have a name.
I think loneliness is such an overwhelming theme because even Chihiro with her parents, she feels so lonely even with her parents. They don't listen to her. They don't really show distinct parental love towards her. They're like, oh God, stop clinging on to me, stuff like that. And from what it seems, she's an only child, so she's just alone. And that's what I think is so powerful about her character and how strong she is because she takes that in a whole separate way. Like, we're going to compare and contrast with No Face is, it makes her stronger. It makes her more wary. Then there's No Face, who is the polar opposite that we talked about. It's crazy how it shows the two polar opposites of loneliness and how it can be either toxic or make you stronger. And even still, you see Chihiro like reaching for bonds. She helps others. So that's another thing that differs is that she does good relentlessly. She is good. She doesn't care if she gets nothing in return. She sacrifices her time when she's like, I need to save my parents, but that can wait. The dragon's dying, or whatever. You need this more than I do kind of ideals. It's just crazy how different their characters are, but they're both so lonely.
And this is going back to like Chihiro, so relentlessly good. Even people who are harming her, she befriends and like doesn't have much hesitation towards it. Like,
she holds no grudges.
Yeah, like at one point, you discover Yubaba has a son who is an enormous baby of indeterminate height, probably 8 feet or taller, but he threatens to break her arm. And then, like, 5 minutes later, she's traveling with him like there's no problem after he gets turned into a fat little mouse. Yubaba doesn't recognize him.
My God. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So Haku actually confronts Yubaba, and he goes, something you hold precious has been replaced. She immediately looks to the gold.
I forgot about that.
She immediately looks at the gold.
What?
She looks at him like, what are you talking about? And then he just waits there. He gives it a little time. And she looks over at her child, who is like eating a grown man, just straight up just shoving food in his mouth. And because she's magic, of course she'll see through it if she's really paying attention, which is the point. She wasn't because she's so greedy. She sees that it's all a transmutation. It's not even her child. Her own child was replaced. I can't.
Yeah, and then she freaks out, but like...
Yeah, like she cares.
This goes back to the buying love thing. I didn't even think about that till just now. Like, when you first meet her son, he's just locked up in a room with all these toys and everything, and like when Yubaba goes to like run into his room to look for him, she's digging through a mountain of toys and pillows and everything.
Okay, so that's a physical representation of her overwhelming need to smother him. She's literally smothering him with affection. And it's all bought affection. It's not real affection. She's literally smothering him with this bought affection. It's so telling. She's taught this baby to be scared of germs and the outside world. She's using fear tactics to keep her child from exploring the outside. And I think that's also very dark.
And the reason he makes the threat to break Chihiro's arm is because he's like, stay here and play with me. And she says, no,
Loneliness.
I can't. Yeah, like he's like, you have to play with me or I'll break your arm.
He's by himself, Mom. He's too busy making money.
When he and Chihiro and No Face and the little Yubaba bird that gets turned into the weird little like bug when they all go on their little adventure, like on the train to go to Zeniba's house in the swamp. You see him actually having fun, like they're all helping her sew and knit and weave and everything.
He defends her at the end against his own mother. When he gets turned back, she's like, I'm good. Like, she's all pissed off, of course. And he goes, if you hurt her, I won't love you anymore. He straight up defends Chihiro against his mom. He goes, we had fun. And I think that character development is super powerful because not only is she's like, you're walking on your own, showing him having his own independence. He's growing.
Yeah, and then like when he says that, she freaks out. She's like, "Oh, I won't like you anymore." It's like, "Oh, I don't have control over him anymore."
It's one of the whole ideas of smothering him, isolating him. It could be also, if you really think about it, she also is lonely. She's separating her own child from the world because she wants someone in her loneliness. She seemed scared that he was gone with someone else, let alone her sister, let alone Chihiro. What is he doing out there? He's not with me. And I'm sure there's a fear there of, will he come back?
Like, and that appears to be like her only relationship that she values, because everything else is based on commodity and what can I get from you? What can you get? What can you bring me? And then, like, she's so suspicious when Haku says, I have something that you value. She's like, don't get fresh with me. And
right.
Like,
with your master. The idea of owning someone, slavery, going back to that again.
The way she's just so condescending, it's like she doesn't see anyone as being worthy of an actual intimate relationship unless people are beneath her.
Yeah.
And even with cares about, you're still beneath me, like I'm controlling you to some degree.
Yeah, even Haku was like, Yubaba controls this world. She's the head here, you know? And even her sister, Zeniba, her twin sister, lives out in the boonies alone. Okay, back to loneliness. She straight up has imbued a lantern with person traits.
Just a little gloved hand and he hops around.
She's living on her own and she's there by herself. And I'm sure when she takes in No Face, they find that companionship in one another. They've both been alone for so long. And I think Yubaba and Zeniba they're two sides of the same coin, because Chihiro, if you look at Chihiro and you look at how she's scared of both of them initially. She doesn't even realize the difference in them at first. Yubaba, she sticks to her word. She is resilient in what she wants. She has no give. Whereas Zeniba, she'll get angry and she's fiery, you know, but she forgives Haku with no stipulation. She's just like, just look after the girl. She's so caring. By the end of the time you see her, you're like, oh, okay. And it kind of makes you question what good and evil are, because you see Chihiro and she's like, oh yeah, call me Granny, you know, and she's like, oh, Granny, you know, and then she goes and she goes back to the mainland where Yubaba is, and she like tests her and all of that, like, find your parents, blah blah blah, it's a trick. And she's like, all right, thanks, Granny. And she's like, Granny, like, she uses that term of endearment and respect for even, you know, the villain in the story, because she respects the fact that she holds her word. She's like, all right, well, you beat me. That's it. Be gone, you know? And I think she respects that. So she's like, I'm going to give you that respect in this name. And it's the idea of a name again. She calls her Granny, which is a term of respect. She gives her this name. So that was something that got carried through for me. And I thought that was really powerful. And for it being one of the last scenes of the movie, it was really beautiful. Like a character that we've not liked the whole movie. Even Chihiro was able to find the good in her.
There's a lot of development, like we've mentioned a few times. Like, there's a lot of development. I think everyone pretty much gets development, or there's additional layer that's like revealed that gives them a little more dimension than what initially is there. Like Kamaji and Yubaba, Haku, like there's a few times where like he's in business mode and like he acts like he doesn't know Chihiro and he's kind of cold. Then like when they're alone together, he's like the nicest guy. And with Chihiro at the beginning, like Yubaba's like, you're a spoiled little brat. You've never worked a day in your life. Then by the end, she's like being very respectful to her, but not like in a fearful way necessarily.
I'm going to be honest. I mean, I don't know a whole lot, probably general knowledge about Japanese culture, but it could be argued, I guess, then that this film was really a reference to the kind of concepts that Japanese culture struggles with between family and kind of the modern business world that encompasses a lot of modern Japanese culture, from my understanding. And my understanding is that a lot of people, especially men, but people in Japan work themselves to death, or expected to work, hundreds of hours a week, and put their jobs first. But also that's tied to them obviously respecting their family, providing for their family. There's obviously a long tradition in Japanese culture, like many Eastern cultures, of honoring the family. Like you said, the grandma or granny, I'm sorry, she uses is like a term of respect. So I guess you could actually look at this movie as kind of that whole push and pull between the two, as to how you're lonely in the business world, how it can be, counterproductive to the human element that is in it, that is, obviously in all of us as part of business if it involves humans, and then kind of trying to reconcile that with more of like a family kind of honor way. Like you said, Zeniba is caring and more generous, more of an actual traditional motherly figure. Zeniba's at least keeps an honor code. That's why I said at the beginning that like she's definitely the antagonist. But I don't know.
You mean Yubaba, right?
Yeah, Yubaba. I'm sorry. Yubaba
Yes.
keeps the code of ethics, and she's definitely the antagonist. But I don't know if she's a villainous antagonist fully, because she definitely concerns herself, like I said, with money first and foremost, but she never tries to harm.
I will give you that. Even she has this code of, why do I do this to myself? Give everybody who asks a job.
Right.
So she has that code of honor. So I'll concede that point. I would also say then that not so much maybe a villain, because she's not outwardly killing people for funsies.
I mean, she does threaten to slaughter Chihiro's parents and their pigs.
But
So
you steal my food, you get turned into a pig.
But then which I understand, because her parents were a-holes.
Yeah.
So I will give her that. They were acting kind of spoiled bratty. I think Chihiro does something at some point, and she's like, well, I'm going to slaughter your
she took her
now.
kid. So it's eye for an eye. It's family for family, which I can't say I disagree with in a roundabout way. I mean it's bad. It's not great.
In Yubaba's eyes, all she knows is that Chihiro's gone with her child. And I'm looking at the names, so I had to write them all down. Haku is just standing there being like, well, Chihiro has your kid. He doesn't say
handle
like
that.
how. Yeah, he doesn't, because he's trying to get her to like bend her will. So he's not going to reveal, oh, well, they're just on a trip and they're trying
they wanted to go. They went on their own accord.
Right. He doesn't really reveal that. So in her mind, she doesn't quite know.
Well, yeah, so in her mind, she stole my baby. I'm going to attack her parents. Like, I understand it to a point. And the fact that she's so easily swayed, okay, fine. Let's give her a final test instead of just slaughtering her parents, Her will is bent to a degree where she still is able to get her way and still feel that she's adequately tested this girl who upset her, but also in an agreeable way to Haku and everybody else who has grown this love for Chihiro. Even the characters that didn't like her in the beginning, they're like, she saved us. It's all because of her. When
she passes the test at the end and she figures out that none of the pigs that are shown are her parents, everyone is cheering. Not even like just the name. Like these nameless background workers that you see are like characters that you haven't seen since the beginning of the movie, like the Radish Spirit. Like you see them all cheering and waving and stuff when they see that, hey, like she won. She beat Yubaba's trick.
It doesn't really go into it. It makes me wonder, are they all prisoners of Yubaba's? Like, because Haku is. He's literally under her control and for a large portion of the movie. Well, how many others are?
Doesn't Lynn say at some point like she wants to get out of there? It doesn't sound like Lynn's kind of there because she likes working at a bathhouse or is trying to save up for a new car or something like that. So one could really argue, again, going back to the dynamics of modern Japanese culture, again, it speaks to, because I know in my writing, like to look at things that are kind of seem opposing. And I think maybe, again, I'm going to butcher his name, Hayao Miyazaki. I don't know. Sorry. Does anyone want to correct me on that one?
Hayao Miyazaki.
There you go. Thank you. Don't look at me to get this. All right.
I
It's going to be at least season 3 before I can pronounce these names any request.
Right. Get there, I believe in you.
He might be kind of, again, looking at people are kind of trapped by the capitalist machine, for lack of a better term. I mean, I know that term gets thrown around a lot because it's never really explained why, I mean, how they even got there. I mean, we know that, again, Yababa takes their name to entrap them, which again speaks to you. I mean, you lose your identity. You can lose your identity in a business, especially a big corporation. You know, you feel like a mindless drone. Hollywood's done this to death, you know, because Hollywood's made up of artists. So, you know, they feel like, you know, working at Cube Farms, you know, death sentence. I agree, but I'm an artist too. But so we see this, that you can lose your identity when you get molded into a corporation. You can feel enslaved and entrapped in that. And, you know, you have to kind of find the humanistic, I guess, heart, which I guess is what Chihiro kind of represented for everybody. She kept her humanity, which, you know, was keeping her name. And she was able to kind of inspire the others in this kind of mindless, we'll say it, you know, money-making prison, basically, of greed.
You know, I've worked in, you can't have any unnatural hair colors. You can't have too much makeup, but you have to, you know, have enough. Don't stand out. Like, if you have acne, like, I've straight up have had people I've worked with who had acne. They were told to cover it up so they blended in more. Like, and I think, you know, that's dark. How dare you, first of all? It goes to that whole idea of you can't stand out too much, but in your uniqueness, you can't stand out either. You know, in the fact that you are a person, we have to take that from you. Like, you have acne, we're going to take that. I had a friend, so she had like a blonde patch. It looks like she had bleached her bangs, and they were like, well, you have to dye it. You know, she had a partial, like a birthmark in her hair that was devoid. It was devoid of all pigment. So she had dark brown hair, and she looks like she bleached a whole front area of her hair. They're like, you can't do that. She goes, no, it's literally, like, I could get a doctor's note. It's literally my hair. They're like, well, you need to dye. If you want to work here, you can't stand out like that. You need to dye your hair brown. You need to dye it all brown or all blonde or whatever. It's the whole idea of you're taking that uniqueness, taking a name, you're taking that from them so that they can fit your mold, so that they could just be part of that machine. And that's why at this point in my life, I'm, you know, I don't really like corporate, like, they call it corporate greed, but it's like the corporate machine and the idea of that everyone needs to be a carbon copy of one another, because it's toxic, not only to the company, because you lose any sort of singularity, you lose any sort of passion. It's damaging to the people working for these companies. It just takes everything from you. It saps you of your uniqueness, your individuality. It's something that I can relate with, and knowing people who have been on the crap end of that.
You know, after listening to you both kind of talk about it, I think that's the message he's trying to say, is you don't want to lose that humanistic individuality, that kind of compassion for the individual. I mean, there's nothing wrong with, like said, business, but, you know, when you lose that, then it becomes something that's detrimental.
And I think especially in Japanese society, that holds true. As a Japanese man, he would be the most knowledgeable about that, especially given his experience. And I didn't think about this till just now, but he's very much a socialist, like openly stated to be a socialist. Like, he was in a lot of like worker strikes in his younger years in the animation industry. And that's one reason like that he was like, screw it, I'm going to open my own animation studio, because he and one of the other guys that became a founder of Studio Ghibli were always...
Is it Ghibli or Ghibli?
I can't remember if it's supposed to be Italian or like Arabic, but just like the soul-crushing work environment, especially of like kind of white-collar Japanese jobs, I think is also a big part of kind of where he's coming from with this movie.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I think we've talked about the unique individual and how you need to let your uniqueness shine in every episode we've done so far.
Oh my gosh, I know.
It's pretty much been present in at least every single anime we've covered. And I think it's present here again. You know, that ties into the mental health themes of victims and villains in general. It's when you feel like you are lonely because you can't be yourself. I mean, that's when people fall into depression. That's when people get anxious and feeling down on themselves. You need to be allowed to be yourself. And I think that's, you know, No Face, we go back to No Face, was a perfect example of that. You know, he was trying to find his unique identity.
And I think it's important to embrace or at least acknowledge both sides of that loneliness, because not everybody's going to handle every situation perfectly, but it's important to acknowledge that what we do as a result of our loneliness affects not only us, but the others around us. And I think that it's important to celebrate our individuality and keep in mind that it's important to embrace those around us who accept our uniqueness instead of ostracize us for it. Those who accept us for our weirdness and our mistakes and our issues, at least personally speaking. Those are the relationships that ground me, because I'm not worried about who I'm presenting as. I don't have to wear this mask. You know, everybody gets lonely, but I think it's the people you share that loneliness with that makes all the difference.
Your own uniqueness can be isolating, and it can be really off-putting to people who are more kind of go with the flow and just kind of fit in with everyone else. And I think No Face experiences that. He tries to fit in with everyone, but they don't really care about him when he's like everyone else. But then the people who do care about him, Zaniba and Chihiro, when he's being himself, that's when people care. There's a balancing act to it. Like, be yourself, but it can be lonely. And that's just something that you've got to realize that comes with the territory. Like, it can be very isolating because a lot of the time people do try to appease whoever they're with instead of just sticking to their guns.
I think I read something a couple of years ago that says there's nothing more isolating than ditching the personality that everybody else wants you to wear. Because especially in high school, especially when we're young, we're taught that if you stand out, that's bad because people are going to dislike you and pick on you. And if you stand out, that people will notice you. As an adult, we're like, well, what's so wrong with that? You know, as a kid, we're taught not to do it. But as we become adults, we're like, well, I'm glad I'm not like everybody else, because going back to the whole Ghost in the Shell episode, the difference between us makes us stronger. And it makes us better. And speaking from my personal experience, I'm nothing like my best friend. We have very differing personalities and opinions. And it makes us stronger as a friendship because we can find the falsities. Like, if we try to put on an air of something, we can immediately call it out. We know better. We've known each other to the point where this isn't you. We're accountable for each other. We are able to lift each other up in our differences. It's a dual loneliness. We're both very introverted. And I think that's what's powerful, is that we're both lifting each other up, saying, you know, you had this girl who stopped talking to you because you were just too open, or you had this guy who was talking to you but stopped talking to you because you were too honest. Somebody's going to appreciate you for those, in their eyes, flaws. But I know a lot of people who like that I'm blunt, who like that I don't sugarcoat things. You know, there are going to be people who love you for your less quote unquote attractive qualities. Everybody's different, and you're going to find somebody who cares about you for who you are instead of the person people want you to be.
I think that was very well said. The only thing I would say is that sometimes it takes a while in adulthood
Oh God, yeah, I feel it. I know.
If you've been listening to the series, you can figure out my age. I'm 38, and I know it was only in the last couple of years that figured that out. And and I think some adults would go even longer without figuring that out. And I think that's again what was trying to maybe be said in the movie. Maybe it was very socialist. If we want to get political, I know Graham, like you said, he's a socialist. So, but or it could just be the fact that he was just trying to say, look, when you work in a corporate job that wants to make you all cookie cutter, it's very easy to just all compare yourselves to your coworkers and to follow that line, that assembly line. And that it could be detrimental to who you really are.
I meant to say this earlier. I kind of blanked on this, but especially in Japanese society, just as a whole, like compared to Western culture, Eastern culture is very like group oriented, and Western culture is much more individualistic. Funnily enough, the woman who introduced me to Studio Ghibli and Spirited Away is my godmother, and she is Japanese, and she talked about growing up, how she stood out a lot, because she was so much taller than everyone, and a lot of the adults would give her grief for it because you have to hammer down the nail that sticks out. They would like make comments about her being too tall, and then she started acting out because of it. She talked about one time how she like climbed out the window, wants to get out of cleaning after school, and like once she put her school uniform in with another set of clothes and it turned it pink, and how that really made the teachers mad. Like, what, your uniform's pink? We don't have pink uniforms. There's a lot of, you got to conform and you can't stick out too much because you're supposed to be part of this group, this cohesive group. Oh, you're too tall? You're wearing a pink uniform? That's not what the group's doing. Like, come on.
That's why a good word to use, conform. I know Japanese culture and a lot of Eastern cultures are very conformist. America's and Western culture is more individualistic, but I mean, you can even see that here where, like Danny was saying, with her experiences with her job. I think nonconformity is how we express ourselves.
Kind of going to what you were saying earlier, Matthew, it hasn't been until the past few years where I've kind of begun accepting that and being like, it's okay for me to rock the boat a little bit, not to be a hellraiser, but just because this isn't really how I feel. Like, I used to just be dorky, straight white male, kid with glasses and a bowl cut, and then at one point in undergrad, like I got an eyebrow piercing, and then a lot of people started talking to me about it, like, what? That doesn't seem like you, Graham. This feels sudden. And they were like, is it the girl you're dating? Did she convince you to do it? Because she had tattoos.
She changed you?
Yeah, and I was like, I've actually been wanting to do this before I even met her. Now I have long hair and I have more piercings and I have tattoos. And I remember when I first got like the eyebrow piercing, I hid it from my family, and when I had one job, I had to hide it and get like a clear one to put in. And now I'm just like, I'm not hiding anything from anyone about that. And then I've become a lot more outspoken to the point where one of my friends is like, Graham, you're probably one of the most open people I know. And I was like, really? Because for a while before this past couple of years, I would always tiptoe around things or like, oh, I don't want to cause trouble or rock the boat. But now I'm just kind of like, nah, I'm sorry, I'm not about that. Or I'll speak my mind, but I have tact, but I've kind of embraced who I am instead of just being like, oh, well, I want to do that, but I can't do that because of how other people will react.
I think it's important to recognize that as adults, we become very tired. We become tired of a lot of things, a lot of BS, as I like to say. We are tired of people telling us what we can and can't do, and it's one thing when you're young and it's your parents, that's part of being a child and growing up. But I think when you're an adult, you become so tired of this fake personality, a mask, this air of, I'm going to fit in with everybody. Doing that for so many years is exhausting. Speaking from personal experience, being someone that everybody else wants you to be, it's so tiring. There's a point where you just start living for yourself. And I think, for example, you got your eyebrow piercing that you've wanted forever, but finally worked up the courage to get. And people are like, oh, she changed you. Oh, you've been tainted. No, I've finally worked up the courage to be myself. I started dyeing my hair crazy colors and dressing the way I wanted to instead of, you can't dress this way. Like, you're a girl. You can't wear jeans and a t-shirt every day and this and that. And I'm not living for other people. And I think it's important to establish the importance of celebrating the differences is what makes us better, and allowing us to be comfortable in our own skin, whether or not that means piercing it or tattooing it or bleaching your hair, dyeing it purple, shaving it off. If that's how you're comfortable, who is anybody else, especially as an adult, who is anybody else to tell you that's wrong? If we can't be ourselves, what are we supposed to be? Do you want to be a cog in that machine? Do you want to be a cookie cutter copy of what the world thinks is correct or normal? I enjoy being my own person. And I think most people, given the chance, would.
If they weren't for that fear.
Definitely
if that is
fear.
terrifying.
But that's the thing. It weeds out the people who aren't your friends. It weeds out the people who don't accept you for who you are. If they only care about you because you have untainted skin and perfectly coiffed hair and a style that should be in vogue, then they're not your friends. If they care about you because you're a good person and you speak up for what's right and you defend the people who need defending and you have no qualms with speaking your mind, I feel like those are the people who love you. In so many words, those are the people who are important to embrace because they embrace you for who you are. They don't care what color hair you have or what you do for a living, and that's not what's important. The point is, like, who you are as a person. If people can't accept you as your own person, then they aren't worth having in your life.
At the end of the day, like, all you have is yourself. Like, in high school, it's a little bit different where it's like you see the same people every day and you're all awkward and trying to figure out who you are. And that's why I think people, especially at that age, are quick to form cliques and stick with like-minded people. But as you get older and you meet people of different backgrounds and different views, like, oh, I got to go to work, and oh, I'm seeing this group of people, and then, oh, here are the friends that I hang out with that aren't from work, and oh, here's my family. It's like you're seeing so many different people, and you have to put on so many, like, different masks if you're trying to juggle all those different groups that you're like, there's not one group necessarily that I'm having to constantly worry about pleasing.
Mrs. Doubtfire, like, putting on these different masks to please different people, it's going to get jumbled up at some point, and it's going to be a mess. If you're faking being all of this, it's gonna get muddled at some point. And it's just easier to just be yourself, be honest, and the people who accept you, and the people who don't aren't worth having around. And it's the same thing as you become an adult. You're so busy with the rest of your life that you're like, what's the point in trying to pretend I'm this person when I don't even have the time to try to rehearse my lines? I got too much of my life to live. And how much life are you wasting being someone else, rehearsing those lines over and over, wearing this mask? You're going to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of emotions, because what are you doing wasting your emotion on people who only care about you because you fit their standard?
Or what they think your standard is based on what you've presented, when it's like, you don't know everything that I have going on.
Clearly, I'm very invested in this topic, and I could talk for a very long time, but I think we should let Matthew talk again.
I agree with all of you. I think that's a very empowering statement. And we're all different, and we all have different things to offer. And, there might be certain people that just don't jive, and that's all right. Then we just go and do our own things. That's part of being a community. And, I know in the audio drama I did, Love's Passion, self-plug there, for Victims and Villains, that was released back in November. That was kind of the major theme of that, was that, you learn who you are by interacting with other people and finding what does jive and what doesn't. And that's part of the realization of self. But you keep yourself intact. It's that selfish aspect that keeps you intact and presents that uniqueness as part of the whole community. And then you find how that part fits into the larger whole, the bigger picture is the term used in that audio drama.
Indeed. We got so deep about Spirited Away. Oh my God. Wow. I'm very passionate about all of these things. So yeah, I see it. That's
Yeah.
why I love this movie, though.
I think it was worthy for, the accolades and the popularity it received. Through conversation with both, Danny and Graham here tonight, I was able to definitely see much deeper into this. I knew when I was watching it that it was a beautiful work of art, but now I definitely see the messages. And I'm glad I ended up buying it so that I can go and rewatch it now.
Yes.
So is there anything else that I know we got really deep and really transcendent, but
No transcendent, yes. No, honestly, I think we covered pretty much everything. Gosh, we covered all my notes at least.
like I said, I have a deeper understanding of it, and I feel empowered now too.
Good, yes. Feel empowered, yes.
I was a little down, honestly, when we started the show, but I feel more empowered now. So
Yes, good.
hopefully you listeners out there do too.
Graham's been quiet for a minute. Anything else?
I'm trying to balance out time because I know I have a bad habit of that. But the only other thing I want to say is, please, please, please listen to the composer of this movie's other soundtracks and this one. Like Danny mentioned earlier, that if you listen to the movie's soundtrack without watching the movie, it's you can kind of tell the feel of what's going on here. There's points in the movie, like Matt mentioned earlier, where there's no dialogue. Things are just kind of you're taking a breather from in between intense scenes. There's a scene where Chihiro's looking out over the ocean by herself, and she's just eating bread. And then there's a scene on the train when they're going to Zeniba's house, and no one's talking, and they're just kind of sitting on the train while the music plays, and it really gives it a moment to shine. This guy, I think for all of Hayao Miyazaki's movies since establishing Studio Ghibli, has worked on every one of his movies, but his name is Joe Hisaishi. I strongly recommend that you listen to all of his stuff. He is very good. Probably my favorite living composer.
They work well in tandem with the artwork and the emotional feel of the movie versus the sound that is conveyed via instrument. It ties together really well. And even during those scenes where you, lose track of time and you lose track of the chaos for just a moment, I think those are the pieces of art throughout that you can really just appreciate isolated. They're really well done because I don't feel like there's too many, and I don't feel like they're in weird places.
I think Miyazaki has said before that he is very intentional when he does those, and he does those with a lot of his movies where, okay, that was a lot. Let's take a breath, let everything soak in for a minute so you're not just blasted with all this information, and better pace the movie and kind of be like, so what's this character going through right now? This just happened, so they're probably feeling kind of isolated and lonely. And I know in some of his other movies in the English dub, I think especially with Kiki's Delivery Service, there aren't as many of those. They ad-lib stuff, so there's not as many of those that you get to see otherwise. But he's very intentional about doing that and just letting there be these calm moments.
Yeah, it's a beautiful all-around film. So, like I say, if you haven't seen it, it really did deserve its accolades and its praise. So go see it.
Agreed.
That will do it for this episode. Our next episode 7, will be on a film called Perfect Blue, which I have not seen. And Danny, I don't think you have even heard of this movie.
Never even heard of it, so it's going to be new to both of us.
This was courtesy of Graham. So Graham, why don't you just give a quick review?
I can actually do this. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. Premise is there is a pop star who makes a career change, and there's some fans who are not very happy about it, and her life goes through some dramatic changes, and it becomes a thriller, basically. It starts taking an effect on her mind. You're just there for the ride and see all the crazy things that happen.
All right.
So that will be interesting. So tune in next episode. In the meantime, where can our listeners find you?
They can find me on Kittens and Caffeine on Instagram, and you can also find me at the same name at my Twitch account, which I have been trying to be more active on and playing video games and building gaming chairs, all that good stuff.
You guys can find me on Twitter at MadShellfish2. I talk about anime and video games and dumb stuff on there. So if you want to see some of that, you can check me out on there.
If you want to contribute to the conversation we had here on this episode, or past episodes, or want to recommend an anime film or a series that you want us to cover, you can reach out to us at animindpodcast@gmail.com. And then you can also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains, over at victimsandvillains.net. On their website, you can find links to their Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube accounts. Victimsandvillains.net also has movie resources, movie reviews, podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. And most importantly, it has an extensive mental health resource library.
For those of you who want to see us nerd out about anime in real time, you can check out our live broadcast on February 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Victims and Villains Twitch feed, which is https://m.twitch.tv/Victims and Villains. We will be discussing the series Attack on Titan to kick off Victims and Villains live stream that weekend to promote mental health awareness.
That will do it for this episode. Until next time, keep both your mental health and anime on the mind.